So today, we're going to talk about a really interesting portrait of a personality that's defined by, well, one thing, just constant contradiction. We're going to unpack a source text that describes this pattern, where what someone says and what they actually do are just always at odds. It creates a really fascinating and, frankly, challenging picture.
I mean, it's a question a lot of us have probably asked ourselves, right? You hear one thing, but then you see something completely different. The source material we're breaking down today really dives into a personality where that exact gap, that space between their words and their actions, is literally the thing that defines them. All right, so where does all this even start? Well, according to this text, it all points back to one single foundational trait, a fundamental inability to accept responsibility for your own actions. And that one idea, it basically becomes the engine for everything else that follows. The source has a name for this, blame shifting. But get this, it's described as way more than just, denying a mistake. It's a complete rewriting of history. In this new, tweaked reality, they are always the victim, and any possible accountability for something that went wrong is just meticulously erased from the story. And this leads to a pretty logical, though destructive, next step. I mean, if you can never, ever admit you made a mistake, how in the world are you supposed to accept any kind of feedback? Well, the source argues you just can't. Any criticism, even if it's genuinely helpful advice, is seen as a direct, personal attack, which immediately triggers this angry, defensive response. So with this internal reality of constantly being on the defense, you've got to have a very different external image, right? To the outside world, this really deep-seated insecurity is hidden behind this very carefully constructed facade of strength.
And here we see that contradiction in black and white. On one hand, you have the public claim, I am courageous. But what the source alleges is that the reality is actually one of cowardice, specifically a really profound fear of being held accountable or having to face any challenge that might expose a weakness.
Now, that color-changing part the text mentions, that's key. It suggests this almost chameleon-like ability to adapt their entire personality, their emotions, their opinions, the whole shebang, to suit whoever they're with. And it's all in service of keeping that carefully crafted public image intact. But listen, this isn't just about passively maintaining an image. No, these traits often show up in some very active behaviors. This next part outlines what the source actually calls a playbook for deliberately undermining the goals of other people. Okay, so check this out. The source lays out this three-step process for goal sabotage. First, they allegedly slow everything down. Second, they intentionally make simple tasks super complicated just to create frustration. And third, they consistently downplay your skills to erode your confidence. And the most important part here is that this isn't about them being incompetent. It's presented as a deliberate, thought-out strategy. So you have to ask, why would anyone do this? Well, the source offers a pretty stark motivation, a fundamental inability to wish other people well. From this point of view, someone else's success isn't something to celebrate. It's a threat that has to be neutralized. And the source sums this whole dynamic up with a really powerful metaphor. It says, they are a veil between you and the goodness that awaits you. Wow. So not just an obstacle, but something that is actively obscuring and blocking you from reaching the good things that might be ahead. All right, so in our final section, we're going to pull back that veil. This is where the source makes some of its absolute boldest claims, describing the private reality that it alleges is hidden from almost everyone. Okay, let's start with finances. Publicly, the picture they present is one of just normalcy. The text says they project this image of being solidly middle class, fitting in, not drawing any attention to their financial status. But
you probably saw this coming. This is immediately contradicted. The source claims this is a total deception, alleging that they have a hidden ability to conceal their true wealth, creating this massive gap between what people see and what's really going on. Then the source just lists these other hidden realities. A materialistic mindset where if you can't see it, it doesn't count. A profound lack of empathy, to the point where they're not even moved by their own children in need. And it even makes specific claims about things like poor personal hygiene. Apparently, all of this is driven by what it calls hidden games and delusional ideas that are running entirely behind the scenes. So after painting this entire detailed portrait, the source arrives at an incredibly bleak conclusion. Arguing with them, totally futile. And, most importantly, it claims there is absolutely no hope of reforming them. From this perspective, the pattern is just unbreakable. And that kind of leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought.
The source doesn't really offer a solution here, just a diagnosis of a personality that's set in stone. So the question it leaves us wrestling with is a really challenging one. If a person, as they're described here, truly cannot be reformed, what comes next?